There is a version of empathy that feels nothing at all. It sees everything, catalogs everything, understands the exact architecture of your pain, and yet remains untouched by it. This is the paradox at the center of what clinical language now calls the dark empath, and understanding this single contradiction may be the most important psychological insight you acquire this year. What is a dark empath? The question surfaces in search bars at 2 in the morning, usually after an encounter that left someone feeling seen in a way that later curdled into dread. A dark empath is not someone who lacks empathy. It is someone who possesses a highly refined, almost surgical form of it, cognitive empathy, the capacity to accurately model another person's internal state without absorbing any of the corresponding emotional weight. How does cognitive empathy work? Think of it as a diagnostic instrument rather than a bond. Most people process another's sadness through a shared nervous system response, mirror neurons firing, a genuine echo of discomfort. The dark empath's instrument runs differently. It reads your micro-expressions, your vocal tremors, the precise moment your voice cracks, and converts all of it into usable data. No warmth required. Just architecture mapped in real time. This is why so many victims struggle to name what happened to them. Signs of an emotional manipulator rarely look like cruelty at first. They look like intimacy. A dark empath will identify your deepest wound with unsettling precision. The abandonment, the unworthiness, the specific childhood fracture you've never said aloud, and speak directly into it, not to heal it, but to establish a foothold. Can someone read your emotions to hurt you? Yes. Not through magic, but through pattern recognition weaponized against a nervous system that was never built to expect betrayal from precision. How to protect your nervous system from psychological abuse begins with a single recalibration. Emotional accuracy is not emotional safety. Someone can know you completely and still intend you harm. This is the operational framework we are about to dissect, mechanism by mechanism, the way a coroner dissects a body to understand exactly how, and exactly when, something died. The first mechanism is emotional stripping. It begins with mirroring, not the surface-level mimicry of body language, but a deeper architectural mirroring of value systems, wounds, and unmet needs. The dark empath studies what you're starving for. Validation, being understood without having to explain yourself. The exact sentence someone should have said to you a decade ago. And then with clinical timing, they say it. The effect is immediate. Your defenses, built over years to filter out low-quality connection, register this person as safe, not because safety was earned, but because it was simulated with total fidelity. This is the inversion at the heart of the entire structure. The nervous system's threat detection system, designed to protect you, becomes the exact mechanism used to disarm you. The better your instincts, the more convincing the counterfeit needs to be, and the dark empath calibrates accordingly. Once the mirroring lands, stripping begins. Layer by layer, your guardedness is framed as a flaw to overcome rather than a function to respect. You are told gently that you don't have to protect yourself here. You are praised for vulnerability the moment you offer it, which reinforces the offering. Within weeks, sometimes days, the architecture of your emotional boundaries has been quietly dismantled, not through force, but through an environment engineered to make dismantling feel like growth. This is the exact point where most victims believe they have found something rare. In truth, they have entered a controlled environment where every subsequent interaction will be measured, tested, and adjusted against the data already collected.
Morphic depth welcomes you. Most bad people have no love, but the dark empath is different. They do not feel your pain, they just study it. They watch how you look, they find what makes you sad, they learn what makes you weak. You think they care, you think they love you, but they don't. If you do not see the trap now, you will lose yourself. Let us look at how they do it.
Insert production note, here what comes next is rarely dramatic. There is no explosive betrayal, no single moment of unmasking. The shift is procedural, and that is precisely what makes it so difficult to detect from inside the structure. Having secured access to your internal architecture, the dark empath now moves from information gathering into active testing, a phase with its own internal logic, its own escalating rhythm, its own name. Calibration cycles are the mechanism by which the dark empath determines your exact tolerance threshold. This is not guesswork. It is applied pressure, delivered in small, deniable increments. A canceled plan with no explanation. A comment that lands just close enough to your old wound to sting, phrased just vaguely enough to be defensible. Silence held a beat too long after you've expressed hurt. Each micro-stressor functions as a probe. The target's reaction, whether they push back, whether they absorb it silently, whether they apologize for reacting at all, becomes new data, fed back into the system. This is calibration in the truest structural sense, an operational framework testing the load-bearing capacity of a nervous system before deciding how much weight it can eventually carry. If you accommodate the first micro-stressor, the second arrives closer to the wound. If you accommodate that, a third arrives closer still. This is not escalation by accident. It is escalation by design. A controlled ascent toward the exact edge of your structural collapse, calculated precisely enough that you rarely reach a breaking point dramatic enough to justify leaving, yet consistently enough that your baseline for acceptable treatment is being silently rewritten with every cycle. The ledger being built here is invisible to the target and perfectly legible to the manipulator. Every tolerated slight is recorded as permission. Every unaddressed injury becomes precedent. The nervous system, exhausted from constant recalibration, begins to interpret mere absence of conflict as safety, when in fact it is simply the architecture holding steady, waiting for the next incremental test. Eventually, the calibration reaches its ceiling, and destabilization has done its work. This is when the final mechanism activates. Synthetic validation is the closing structure of the entire operation. Having methodically eroded your baseline sense of security, the dark empath now reintroduces warmth, but only at the exact moment your distress peaks. The rescue always arrives precisely when needed, engineered to feel miraculous rather than mechanical. A single reassuring message after days of cold withdrawal. A moment of tenderness immediately following a manufactured crisis. The relief is so total that it overwrites the memory of who caused the crisis in the first place. This is not comfort in any organic sense. It is a dosage, administered with the same precision used to strip your defenses and calibrate your tolerance. The target's nervous system, having been trained through repeated cycles to associate this specific source with both the wound and the relief, begins seeking validation exclusively from the one person orchestrating the entire structure. Dependency is not a side effect. It is the intended output. What makes this mechanism so effective is its self-reinforcing nature. Every rescue confirms, retroactively, that the relationship is worth the instability. Every dose of relief resets the target's tolerance for the next round of stripping and calibration. The system does not need to escalate forever. It only needs to convince the target that submission is the price of peace, and that the alternative, walking away from the only source of validation the nervous system now recognizes, is unthinkable. Recognizing this architecture is the only real form of protection available. Not confrontation, not appeals to fairness, not waiting for the manipulator to reveal themselves through cruelty they may never display. Recognition alone begins to return authorship of your nervous system to you, and a sovereign nervous system, one that no longer requires external calibration to determine its own worth, cannot be operated by anyone else's design.